we are gonna talk and think about and discuss and try out collective collage making as higher education practice.
I'm Sandra Sinfield from London Metropolitan University.
I am Tom Burns from London Metropolitan University.
And our colleague Sandra.
And I'm from the University of Calgary, and you heard a little bit, I've been in the UK before, so just moved to Canada a while ago. So now Canadian, or calling myself Canadian.
Yeah, so thank you. It's a great honour for us to be invited here, and we're looking forward to the session very much. Thank you.
And please, any way through, if there's something you'd like to ask, or you never understood because of my language, or you never understood it in terms of the context, or you might want to ask a question like, how does it fit into your context? Please stop us at any time, raise a hand, and Kimmy will let you in, and enjoy it. Enjoy it. Enjoy.
Please try and enjoy the session. Sandra, you're the one navigating through the slides. I don't know if we can do that from here.
Yes, absolutely. So we are welcoming you into the seminar by doing a very small exercise. I'm bringing you here, and I think, it's a session where we want to be active and interactive without, stretching it too far and ask you to do crazy things. So we have quite a bit of theory and theoretical background. We have a lot of references to readings, which you can use. So we try to make it, hands-on as well as very theoretical, so you can take whatever you need for your own practice. But to bring you here, we just ask you to look up, look down, look left, and look right. And then in the space where you are, and we heard you're all very international, spot something red in the room where you are. Spot something yellow. Spot something green. And with that very short exercise, we welcome you to our webinar session where we focus on the visual. So that is our key theme. And we want to bring that into academia and talk with you about how to use that in academia. The three of us, so Sandra, Tom, and I, we engage together in what we call collaborative writing as a method of inquiry. So it's a method that has been put forward by Ken Gale and Helen Bosted. And it takes really writing as a method of research to find out about yourself, about other people, about the world. And they have written extensively about that, but also they have theorized it. And in their work, they mainly draw on the Deleuzian-Guattarian notion of the rhizome, of lines of flight, of the nomadic. So they use writing more as a means to find out rather than a means to present facts. And so this is where the three of us come together, and that is what most of our research practice uses. From this work, or from this dialogue with each other, emerged our paper, which is called Dialogic Montage, that has just recently been published in the Journal of Play in Adulthood. And that is what brought us here. So the three of us have not written together, but we have made collages together and visually communicated with each other about playful practice in academia. So rather than writing about it, we were visually trying to express and explore what playful practice in academia means. And so that is the starting point for the seminar or the webinar today. So we have beyond that one paper, we have done more work on creative and playful practice in academia. Play or creativity, often seen as sitting in the Department of Art, or seen as something that's for younger children. So it comes up to maximum primary school or maybe high school if at best, but then if you go to university, it's seen as something academics don't do and it's something that students don't need to do. So we have used that in our own teaching practice and we have written about that. And it's something we really strongly feel about. We feel that creative practice and playful practice in higher education is very important, that it should be there, mainly because it gives voice and agency and it builds self-efficacy. And the three of us have worked in what is called in the UK a higher education widening participation institution. So meaning those that are not traditionally welcome in higher education attend that university. So they often struggle with what academia is, what it is for, and they are often also sidelined and marginalized. And so we found that play and creative practice gives them something to say and it gives them a voice. So we really advocate for that in our own work. So what we want to do with you today is we want to introduce you to one creative or playful practice, the one that we were trying out together, that we were using with our students, which is collages. So we talk about definitions, approaches, theories, and reasons. So a little bit of theory first, but then we want to make it interactive. We have an activity for you, which you can do here and now where you are. We talk about a bit more about why use collages. So we talk about visual conversations, online communication, communication more generally. We have another short activity for you, and we talk a little bit more about play and playful practice. A third activity where we open the floor up, and that is going to be an interactive one where we also talk, where you can share your own practice, where we can talk about and debate together. And before coming to the conclusion, where we try to draw everything together and have some recommendations for you to take forward. So that's the plan for the 1.5 hours. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Sandra.
So we're looking particularly at collages, and just a brief word that we want to bring into our practice many ludic and playful practices. We go with Winnicott, who says it's in play and only in play that we're fiercely alive and fiercely ourselves. And with our students who've been so sidelined often by education, that's what we want, to create those spaces where they can be fiercely themselves in our classrooms.
And Winnicott points this out where it's sort of even more crucial, is when people are on the cusp of that changing, of that dynamic. And we find this really pertinent to our students who are non-traditional students that are making these transitions between cultures, between educational systems, between classes. And introducing play there is a safe, creative and dynamic space to open up that they can own.
Yeah. And whilst drawing to learn would also work, there's an internalized conception within students that you can only draw if you can draw like Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci. The drawing has to be perfect, and that gets in the way. Most of our students, when we have classroom questions, gave up drawing when they left kindergarten. So we started with collages as a bridge between playful practice and drawing practice and other creative practices, because there's something more experimental and tentative about collages per se. So it allows people into the other artful practices that promote active learning. And there are different sorts of collages. I mean, the definition of collage is, you know, it comes from the French to glue. And it's an assemblage of different forms that come together to create a new whole. And traditionally and easily in the classroom, it's newspaper clippings and magazine pictures and found objects and you can just turn up in the classroom with your magazines and scissors and glue and some sugar paper, and something really dynamic can happen. In staff development sessions, we often have that where the staff construct first an image of themselves as a tutor, and then they construct an image of the student, and it gets conversations going.
And also, which we'll come on to a little bit later, but also magazines, newspapers, and so on. These are familiar items to students. You are using artifacts from their culture, from popular contemporary culture. So there's...
Yeah, and it sort of subtly changed them from being consumers, passive consumers of cultures, to people who now act with and on culture. So there's another sort of subliminal message in there as well. There are two general different approaches to collage making. One is where it's quite conscious, where you've been set a task and you consciously pick out the pictures and the words and the textures that you want to use to construct your message. And the other is more spontaneous and playful, where the meaning emerges when the maker reflects on what they've produced. They sort of think, I'm thinking about the topic, I'm picking images and words, I'm placing them where it just feels right. And when something's complete, they then reflect on it and tease out meaning.
A good example here of the conscious is sort of at the birth of collages. Well, it's not with some, but contemporary collages, which was Picasso, where he did his newspaper collages, whereabouts he ripped pieces of newspapers that had war reports, diplomatic reports, government reports up into strips and placed them in a circle. And this was a commentary of where particularly Picasso was challenging traditionalism. One, the traditionalism of cafe society, where these newspapers would be being read and discussed, and these newspaper articles from sort of 1910 to 1912, he did these, was about the emerging wars that were taking place in the Balkans. And say 2 years after Picasso producing these collages, all of Europe erupts in, and there they are. And also within the sort of the British contemporary scene here, which not being read in cafe society, we didn't have cafe society in Britain, we had the gentleman's club or your library, where men would retreat into the gentleman's club and read the Times of London or the Daily Telegraph and get the Commonwealth reports in from the foreign, or here it was called the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. But again, he was challenging this very notion of mass communication then, of knowledge generation, of dialogue, and about acting on it, not just being passive with it. And the other one is Anna Hock, much more emergent, was actually challenging the sort of dominant ideas that was coming out of the Weimar Republic in terms of the positionality of women and their place within society, which literally was emerging as she was creating these collages.
This relates to the two sort of formats that influence our work, which is, Sandra, Surrealism. So we draw particularly on the Surrealists, and it's trying to bridge the subconscious and the reality. And as Tom was saying with the Picasso, juxtaposing the reality of those newspaper results in these dreamscapes is trying to create new apprehensions. It's unlocking the power of the imagination to create meaning and to apprehend meaning. And the sort of more challenging is the Dadaists, where they attack rationality itself. So they're absolutely embracing the chance, the accident, the improvisation of collage, the new meanings that come as you crash these different images and words together. And it's challenging that art has to be conscious, and art has to be a craft, controlled and intentional. Hannah Hock wanted to disrupt that as well, not just disrupt the meanings, but the very notion of what art is and what art could be.
And this is sort of where the Frankfurt school is sort of embryonic here, whereabouts you've got Anna Hock and the Dadaism, embracing contemporary culture, right on the birth of modernity here, of mass culture, popular culture, challenging the very notions of sort of elitism and Ricky had probably known, you know, the sort of British formalist tradition of literature and so on that was now being challenged. And here, this is what runs into the work of sort of people like Benjamin or Adorno that then carried this through in the much more commodified types of communication. But, you know, lots that we can be taken for granted and internalized is of the world that we're in of mass communication, and then its commodification, are really quite new. They're yeah.
And I think we've given quite a few reasons for why already in our preamble here. But it's, you know, the collage is a palimpsest. It's something reused, it's altered, but it bears traces of its original meanings. I mean, when people ask what's my favourite word, palimpsest is that, you know, that notion of scraping off a text so that from the calf skin, you know, and the new meanings that are there, and the annotations in the margins that are in dialogue with the new text that you're creating. Is such a dynamic juxtaposition of signifiers. It brings attitude, it creates new live metaphors to work with and analyse.
And this is sort of where all of this becomes conscious. It was sort of known about here that the sort of classic text that was in monasteries and libraries, that the most interesting things about the classical text was what the monks had put into the margins that was reflecting on the context that they was being read in, that was giving that reflection back. And here we see these sort of emerging traditions here through to, you know, sort of Benjamin here, and that real notion of these artifacts have had these lived and these real existences. These have been in the world, and now we can reflect on those and reuse them, which is also a great sort of pedagogic tool of sort of discussing ecology and sustainability and the ecologies around sustainability with students. So on the reusable object, the reusable form, we are going to create a collage now. And what I would like you to do is to stand up and move around your room and collect 10 to 15 words from the back of books, for some people from the back of boxes that they're collecting,
in magazines, glancing at your desk. Just 2 minutes.
2 minutes, collect 10 to 15 words and write them down. Yeah. Beginning now. Well done, good people. Now we are going to put those random words to good purpose. And we'd like you to think about the term creative collaboration. Creative collaboration. Collaborating, working with, being creative. You can change the font and size of your words. You can highlight your words, underline your words, or put them in colour. You can also cheat a little bit if you want. We always think of yeah. And you can add a couple of the's and and if you want them to run together or not. Using those 15 words, and there is a Google Doc that if you click on that, that should take you straight there. If not,
if you're looking for it, it's in the chat.
Oh, it's in the chat. Yeah. It's in the chat.
And there is no further rules apart from what we've just said. So you can interfere with each other or you can leave each other alone. So choose a spot on that page. Then keep in the back of your mind, it's about creative collaboration. So whatever words you have, try to say something or convey something with possibly very strange words you've got that relate to that topic. I love how the last word on the document currently is cleaner. So get inspired of what there is.
Oh, people, this is amazing. Oh, look at the playing with fonts.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
The history of fonts.
I love there is also neurochemistry and jelly nutrition for my soul. There's past indulgence. And possibly the COVID is the hand removed shell, which the sanitizers and the soap and everything we all have around us these days. Give you a couple of more minutes to shuffle around. Feel also free, if you're not happy where you are on the document, to put it elsewhere, or feel free to give it a title, the overall document, or your own bit, or you can also join your
Oh yeah. Someone's showing up. A collage operation. Oh, that's fantastic. I love all the different names we've all got in here as well.
Yeah, I like the technology in wine. Is wine being turned into a proper noun now?
And as you can see, when you open a Google Doc like this, it doesn't reveal if you're the rhino or the kangaroo or the wombat. So you can be and you can do without having to give away who you are. And we usually find this works really well with students if they are entering a session, if they're feeling shy, if they're not sure about things. So if Google Docs are created this way and people don't log in, you don't know, or you can anonymously contribute. So people often say, I use all sorts of tools, but we find Google Docs actually, when it's just a link and people join anonymously, is quite a nice working tool where people can anonymously contribute.
Yeah, nice point, Sandra. We also use it quite a lot with staff development, where we have columns and then we ask them to put down their good practice that they're doing and share that. And it's really nice to see that hasn't come up in conversations, hasn't come up in the chat box, but then in the Google Docs, it gives people a chance to shine as well as for that when they're not confident, but a chance to shine and do it anonymously. But quite often we find that they do put down their name because they actually want to say where they're doing this, because it's at what level and in what subject area, and I do this, and other people then put, I do something very similar in a completely different subject area and different level. So it sort of shows those similarities and differences, and how you can repurpose activities and so on at different levels and for different subjects. So again, creative, collaborative approaches to learning.
Thank you for the ones you did. They're wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Shall we return?
Yeah.
Yeah, and has anyone got any comments that they'd like to make?
Did you enjoy it?
Did you
Was it
enjoy
nice?
I really enjoyed where people started weaving each other's words together. So it kind of became this the beehive mind kind of poetic spirit.
Yes, I mean, I think we thought that this is a threshold concept of collaborative work, when you start feeling brave enough to work on other people's words, and you know, you're not ashamed or embarrassed. I'll add here. I think it's really important.
And that cusp of that cusp, that transition point, as
I don't know. Anyway. That's the next slide, Sandra.
Yeah.
So as we've said, we do use these collages in playful and creative ways in our teaching. As I said, one of the most simple ones was when you've got a staff development session and you ask the staff to do a collage self-portrait first. This is me, or this is me as a tutor. And what Tom's really good at is then, if we're in a face-to-face classroom, he's getting everybody up and moving about, and you show your collage to somebody, and rather than firstly you say what you thought was in there, they say what they see. So it starts a really nice dialogue with each other about what you think you've created and what they're seeing in your practice, and therefore what good practice might be.
But those of getting, you know, participants to move. An activity I really love doing, and doing it twice with students, is I fill a room with rich pictures, fill the room everywhere with rich pictures. And on all the desks, on all the side walls, all over the floor, everywhere rich pictures. And I say to students, now what I would like you to do is to look around the room and pick a picture that represents whatever. And 70% pick the picture that is in front of them. And then I say, now get up and move around the room, and they can, and you've disrupted one of what they thought, that performative exercise. I've got one, I can go, reminds me of someone little, blah, 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 blah. Actually start engaging with each other, with what the subject is, with what the class is, with the environment. And this little activity we just done is one of transferring that online, of actually getting people up to actually start being in the moment, and beginning to own the classroom and the space as well, where we are in those spaces.
And then I think, as we said to you, and as we've done just now, collages can also be words, so they don't necessarily just need to be visuals. And so if you don't have magazines anymore, which some of us don't, then you can also play with words, and you can print them out. You can let people write their own words on pieces of paper and rearrange them, or you can, as we've just done now, you can do it digitally. You can set specific tasks for the words. You can give a list of words. You can be as free as we've just been now. So there is ways around if you don't have the visuals. You know, most students, or at least most universities, do have a piece of paper. You can grab them out of the photocopy machine, and there you go. You have materials, you can write on them, you can print on them, and you can have, you don't need to use expensive printing by printing colored images, you can print words. So that's just one add-on too.
What's really nice as well is leading students into critical thinking through this, because quite often we've found that feedback on student assignments is too descriptive or not critical enough. And these expressions don't mean much for students at certain points in their academic life. But if, say, they've made a collage or chosen a rich picture to examine a topic, we say, first, just sit and literally describe what you see. Just describe it. Now, say why it answers that question. Say why it represents your first few weeks at university. Say why it represents the concept of a university, or whatever the question is. So they move through a descriptive phase into an analytical, critical phase. And you're showing that connection between, you know, what is huge university practice. First, you observe something, you describe it, you analyze it. And it's helping them learn that balance between the descriptive moment and the analytical, critical moment in very simple ways that make sense.
And really interesting there of how it starts to refine the observation and the biases that come from our own observations. There's an activity, well, it was actually an assignment that when I was in education, I would be astounded with, and until I started teaching it, which was where students had to go and observe children at play in the playground. Go and observe children at play. And the amount of students that came back, and it said, I was watching little Johnny, he fell over, he went to the class, the playground assistant, who didn't talk to him very much. Then he went to the class, to the playground teacher, who didn't talk to him very much. The classroom teacher started talking to the assistant, and they hadn't actually observed children playing. They was judging the professionals, the teachers that was there on their response to somebody falling over. Legitimate to do, but that wasn't the assignment. And when you put the rich pictures out, there's one whereabouts there's sort of 50, 60 of them I would put out, and one of them would be black and white. And the amount of students, they always got picked the black and white one, and then they would describe it and so on, of how rich and how creative and so on this picture is. And I said, you haven't said that it's black and white and not colour. And the whole class hasn't noticed, the participant hasn't noticed, and so just drawing that attention to observing. And there, that black and white picture spoke to the class, because it was very nuanced, as what the coloured pictures are. Whereabouts we have this idea of a rich picture being full of colour and so on, the black and white one would always get picked, you know.
And of course, if you do lots of collage making with your students in the real world, you can always collect them, and these can become your rich pictures for later work like this or future classes. So, Sandra, do you? Yeah, so we held this visual conversation that Sandra was mentioning at the beginning on our playful practice to generate new insights. And we did this, I mean, obviously we're distanced physically now that Sandra works in Canada anyway, but we did this during the lockdown when all our teaching had switched online, and somehow actually we all seem to be working more and working all the time. So actually setting this task for ourselves was to create a generous space for ourselves to be creative and to be with each other in a gentler way. You know, that notion that the university lecturer has to be productive every single minute. And this is a form of productivity, but it was a much more humane form of productivity. So we held a conversation back and forth in pictures to create that humane space. It unfolded synchronously and asynchronously, with us posting our images online and responding to them when we could. And these are some of the pictures that we created. So we thought we'd just show them to you. You might like to see them. And
Yeah,
Tom
and I think
started-
yeah, and I just think we it's a conversation, and we planned it as a conversation. So Tom started it off, and maybe Tom, you want to say. So we really, our premise was to talk about playful academia, but not by talking to each other and not by writing to each other, but by sending each other pictures or collages, more precisely.
This was my first attempt at looking at creativity and pedagogy and HE. And every time I see this picture, it changes with its meanings of whatever they were when I intended them. And I certainly knew that part of it was we run from the sort of bottom right-hand corner, which was disrupting that sort of passivity, that taken for granted, that idea of common sense and normative, and disrupting that through popular culture and ecology. But ones that I sort of see this now of which comes out more, is the idea of movement, of transport, of the modern, the box girder bridge, the trains cutting through the wilderness, of how much of my education has been tied up with the ideas of modernity, and modernity offering solutions that haven't actually manifest themselves. And sort of something. I'll come back to this. Yeah, go on. Move on.
I'll just say the interesting thing about Tom's picture there was that he didn't glue his images down, so he could reuse them if he wanted to. This was my response to Tom's picture. I think you can see I wasn't in such an optimistic mood as Tom was. I guess you might see that this very left-hand corner with these classical columns crisscrossing but in colour was, I thought, this is as good as it gets, you know, a little bit of colour in the classical domain. I was feeling that education was really ideological state apparatus. It was very repressive. It was constraining. It was firefighting. It was little individual students in little glass cubicles protected from each other. So I shared this positive image with Sandra, who then responded much more positively.
So these two came my way, and I, with a background in German, I got my German magazines out, and I thought, we need to be more aspirational. We need to really aim high. And so that's what this collage says. So we need to start not tomorrow, but today. And we need to really create that space here as more as a physical space, but obviously it's also more of a metaphorical space. You can see there is also Tom's train still running. so really as an invitation to keep going. So that was my response to those two collages. And he went back.
And I thought I'd better respond. Since I was trying to kill the mood, I thought, right, let's see something more positive here. And I think you can see I've just tried to capture something a little bit more nebulous. I'm now I feel that the words are actually a bit constraining, and I sort of prefer it when there aren't so many words there, but at least it was a more positive response, I think. And then Tom responded again, moving your images around. Obviously, you all can look in and see what you see, because what you see in these collages is as valuable and valid as what we see.
And what strikes me with it is, and the modernity thing, and talking about Picasso's early newspaper collages, is these iconic things of modernity and the train and the cruise liner, the ship. Without these two pieces of technology, World War would have been impossible. It was only the train that facilitated the First World War and the mass death, because it could transport troops quick enough to be shot. And equally with a cruise liner, it allowed troops to be shipped all around the world, so that the cruise liner was actually a key part of the military industrial complex of its time. And yet these.
So you can see that Tom's darkness is a little bit more subliminal than my darkness when we're looking at the images and what's the potential of creativity in education and in pedagogic practice.
And on that sort, saying about the pedagogic practice here and
We've moved on to the next picture.
and collage and art and so on, is that Cole Rogers, great pedagogue and psychotherapist, used art therapy within his practice, his clinical practice. And we know lots about the power and the effectiveness of art therapy. But also what Cole Rogers started doing was using collages with his research students. So when students were coming for supervision and producing chapters and so on, he would say also make a collage with it. And that allowed again for that observation and for that drilling down into the granular of what meanings are.
Sandra.
Yeah, and I think it's an important point. And so we teach collages and we use collages to teach, but also we use collages really for ourselves. So we really use them as our own creative research practice, as our way to talk to each other, to think about things, to spark, thoughts. So it's really also a research tool for ourselves. So people often say, yeah, I use it for students, but we also take it really seriously in that we are using it for ourselves and our own academic and research practice. So it's really something we like using as a three. And that is kind of where the conversation ended, from some very dark spaces to very bright spaces. But I just think, generally you get the feeling that we're feeling very enthusiastic about collage making. And we find, it's something that we can do in hectic times. And it brings us back together, but also back with ourselves. And it kind of refocuses our thinking. It helps us, finding some essentials we really want to talk about, for example, in a research paper. It also allows us to do research about things. So as Sandra said, academic staff in training has been asked to make collages, and we use those and we analyze those together with them. So producing some outputs on thinking about academia. So really something that is for us very multifaceted, not just in how it's made and used, but as a whole, thinking tool.
I think we have to move on a little bit because we do have some more activity.
I'm with you on it.
We sort of talked a bit there. So it's very much part of our dialogue and our dialogic. The collage is part of our research practice, it's part of our professional practice, and it's the same when we use it with the students to get them to reflect on the learning that they've undertaken, their experiences so far. And when we've got first year undergraduate students doing small qualitative research projects, we ask them to use these more creative methods to help them enjoy research so that they actually find research enjoyable in the first year to prepare them for their third year research projects.
It's also taking them, say again, from that observing, interpreting, and then discussing. That those real, so there's these individual cognitive ones, but then using Vygotsky and zones of proximal development and so on, you're putting something in the middle to encourage the dialogue, the discussion, and not one that's presupposed on there's going to be a right answer here that we're looking for. This is about the dialogue and the discussion and engaging in, and this is where, horrible to say this, but sort of creativity and play isn't all what it is fun, but it's not
serious business.
It's serious. It's serious
It's
stuff.
serious academic business.
And with that, it being serious business, we invite you to play. So we have another short activity for you, and it's collage making digitally. So we really know that most of us these days are online, that we are, you know, bound to our own homes, and we just want to quickly show you that we can make digital collages too. So we invite you to the Jamboard, where we have pre-populated pages. You can go on the top, and there is 2 arrows, and that takes you through the pages. At some points there will be empty ones, and there is visuals taken from Unsplash. So these are images that are under Creative Commons license, so you can use them. They are not copyright protected, and I think that's usually an important point to consider when you're making digital collages, where things are easily shared, screenshotted. So you want, not your academic colleagues and your students, you don't want to get in trouble to break copyright issues. So we recommend you using, when you use visual images online, you find like the ones we use, those that are under Creative Commons license. In Jamboard, once you're in, you have the left-hand side where you can shuffle them around, you can crop them, you can color them, you can cut them, you can add your own, you can add text, you can scribble over, you can erase. And we just want you to focus on play in academia. You can be several people on one page, or you can claim your own page. You can move images over. If you're very brave, you can upload your own images. If you have some on your desktop, if you have some on your computer, just be mindful that they are either your own images or on the Creative Commons license. So we want you to play around with that for 5 minutes or so. A comment on playful academia with visuals. And if you have issues accessing the Jamboard, please give us a shout in the chat. So you can move around, you can delete pictures. We're not offended at all. You can have one. You can play with the tools on the left-hand side. Make them bigger, you can turn them, you can put some words. And for those who have not found out, on the very top, you can move between slides. You can go and see what others are doing, if they're doing anything at all. There's empty slides at the end. There's also something called sticky notes.
Slightly terrified by the person who's painted out the word sleep. I'm just saying.
I'm not going to keep you here forever. But as you make, feel free to also comment in the chat if you have time, but I know it's tricky to be in several places and spaces at the same time. But you probably get a feel on how collage making with visuals online is sort of different from what we've done with words. How possibly also the tools that we've given you matter. So we've selected the Google Jamboard. We can have a debate on how user-friendly or unfriendly it is, how spontaneous or unspontaneous it is. So that is something to consider if you make collages online. How easy is it to access? How easy is it to navigate? What does it allow you to do and what is not possible? I like somebody found out how to draw the lemon on the page one, got a face. Somebody says, what's next? Gonna bring you back. But you possibly also get the feeling that it does take a little bit for you to figure out on how to do things or how to do the things you want to do. If you want to use this with your students, it does require, even though the tool is quite simple, I think, in that you only need the link to log in or attend, and you can start editing or adjusting and moving straight away. But to figure out on how to do things, it does take a little bit of time. I'm gonna bring you back.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely find that,
and if you
when
feel
you're
free
doing-
to hang around in the Jamboard.
yeah, do carry on. I definitely noticed that when doing this with students, the collage in the classroom is easier. They seem released to pick up the paper and to start cutting and sticking very quickly. Whereas I think the online, whilst possible, there's an extra little barrier between you and the control over the materials. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. And I just give it a bit more time, perhaps. That's it. So
Yeah. So we think it's to bring you back. So to play, we really say, play in class, play online, play generally in academia is disruptive and transgressive. So it's different, but also it gives voice. So it can transcend what we call the normative and challenge notions of teaching and learning. And that is for both sides. So for those that teach and for those that learn. So we're often still have that notion ingrained that children play, but adults don't. But play can liberate, especially those that, are often marginalized and sidelined. So those that are not welcome in academia and academic spaces, so where it's supposed to be very formal, very with strict rules and ways of expression that are given and that are expected. So we find really that collage making is a way of finding voice and also as a way of voicing opinion. So students discover that they can say something, that they have something to say, and it's visualized and it opens it up for discussion with others, and that can be quite powerful. And they often be very shy to talk in class. They're often very shy to write, or even shyer to write something, put in something on paper. Whereas with collage making, we find they're finding their feet more easily. So they can actually become the academics or the professionals they want to be. So they can define their learning and they can take it on their own pace and they can start where they are. And we like to refer to Huizinga in this regard. He wrote the book Homo Ludens. So making the argument that, and he's, by the way, Dutch, that's for Ricky. So he made the arguments that play is important, an important part of culture and society, and that play is primary. So play comes early in human life. So play is something that's essential to how we humans are and how we learn and how it defines us. So he says it's a very important notion that is part of the human. He also says, you know, it's a cultural phenomenon, and it's something that, you know, creates or helps us create and understand the world around us. So he talks about the play mood. So he says it's something that is according to rules freely accepted, or he also likes to say play is in fact freedom. So play has its own framework. So it is able to rapture and disrupture, and it provides enthusiasm. So it can, you know, engage, and it can actually empower.
And this can also go to these other creative sort of movements that through literature. Bakhtin and Shklovsky, when we think about the carnival and how the carnival and the play and the festival is topsy-turvy and turns things on their head and juxtaposes within play and within spaces that are not owned by the powerful.
Yeah, and going right back to Gibbs, who talks about the word knowledge having Greek and Norse roots, which means to have sport with ideas. And if we cannot liberate our students to have sport with ideas, they cannot know them, they can't own them, they can't make them their own.
And we have here just a few references that, you know, you may be interested in. We're happy to share afterwards as well. You know, there's a journal of play in adulthood, but there's also other interesting pieces of writing. And there is the argument of, you know, developing play or playful academia as a signature pedagogy. So, you know, rather than taking writing as our main, why not play? So, you know, feel free to delve into those, and we're going to share those too.
Okay, we are nearly coming to the end. So this is our final activity. So this is, as I say to my students coming up to exams or the essays, this is your opportunity to show off, show how clever, how beautiful and how creative you are. So we'd like you now to create a collage, either with paper, scissors, glue, online or on the desk, and then take a picture and post it, or by arranging objects in your room. Collect objects together and photograph those. Again, focusing on how we create how we create a playful academia, how we can do these activities and how we can promote a playful academia. So paper, scissors, on, you got the digital.
Yeah, you can do the collage and take a picture of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
You've still got the Jamboard if you want to make, you know, carry on there making your collage there. Or as Tom says, an assemblage on your desk or in your room, and take a photo if you can. Not everyone has the technology to take a photo and upload it. So we want you to be able to use the technology you can use. And the idea was that this is a bit like a quilting activity. If it's possible, while you're making your collage or stacking objects in your room, we can also talk. So we can discuss the ideas that have been before, just like in quilting.
As they emerge.
Yes.
And also, I think that's the point where we're really interested to hear about your own experience, how you are playful in academia. So if you unmute yourself and you're doing, you know, we're interested to hear your examples. So, or also comments, questions. That's the time now to ask. And we leave it as a maker space, so where we can do, and we would be grateful if you share what you do while we talk, but also if you have comments, if you have own examples, please, you know, that's the time to share those now.
We did have a couple of extra slides. I don't know if we want to gallop through that last slide or if we think that's fine, we're all happy now.
Well, the
But there
last slide was just making the strong point that we
Yeah,
It
should
was just
all
making
play
some-
and that we encourage you to play.
Yeah.
And even better if you start collage making.
Yes.
Yeah, and just like I will at least do that. So everyone has the opportunity of downloading the Jamboard and the document, and we will also do that and send that around to everyone who signed up and all of those we know that are stuck in less human parts of academia probably at this moment and not being able to be here and feel a little bit more alive. I did coming out of a 4-hour staff meeting. This was truly, I can feel my stomach again, and I had fun, and I actually can see like where I want to play more with this. I want to experiment a little bit with this, both in my research, but also in my teaching. Actually, see what happens if we can get students to get over themselves and also say something for themselves at the same time. I think that's really an interesting tension to explore.
Yeah. Thank you, Ricky. Yeah.
I mean, just on one there is start early with students. Is don't just bring it in. First time you meet them in induction, get them doodling, drawing, collage making right from the beginning. Is draw.
Yeah.
So it doesn't come as a shock to them when you say we're going to produce our masterpieces.
And so I want to say, and we can hang out. People don't need to leave. I won't close the laptop so we can hang out, but just I know some people might have to leave. So thank you, Sandra and Tom, so much for this wonderful talk and really wonderful activities you took us through. It was a great pleasure, and I can see Kationa and Jenny being here, and they have our next PUC talk on the 29th of November, which we shared earlier. So, pop up to that. And I think that's going to be just as strange, probably, thinking about imaginary friends and stuff like that. Yeah, so wonderful. And thank you, everyone, for coming. And people can hang out if they have any more questions or comments. The collages are open, so you can also just stay in there for a couple of hours and mess around. And hope to see you all next time, and also for the great book reception, book launch on the 8th of December. I'm looking at Kimmy to see if she's doing this. What's the right date? Great. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Sandra, and Tom. And